Welcome to Inner Shadow. This is where we expose what most people spend their lives trying to avoid. What's buried, what's unspoken, what's sabotaging us from within. In today's episode, we're diving into a specific kind of inner struggle, one that plagues many deep thinkers. It's the quiet war between intellect and action. And if you're the kind of person who reflects deeply, plans extensively, understands things on a conceptual level, but still finds yourself paralyzed when it comes to execution, then this is not just a topic. This is your mirror. Because there's a strange contradiction that lives inside the minds of many intelligent, introspective individuals. They see further than most, yet move slower than most. They imagine possibilities, anticipate consequences, and calculate every angle, but somehow never quite reach the outcome they envisioned. The tragedy isn't lack of potential, it's the slow erosion of momentum. They overthink themselves out of success. Why does this happen? Let's begin with the surface explanation. Overthinking looks like caution, like precision, like a desire to get it right. But beneath that polished exterior is something more unstable. Chronic self-doubt dressed up as logic. An unconscious refusal to risk being wrong. The deeper the mind goes, the more reasons it finds to hesitate, and eventually thought becomes a hiding place. What most people mistake as high standards is in truth a sophisticated form of fear. Fear of exposure, fear of failure, fear of disappointing an internal judge that never seems satisfied. This isn't laziness. It's not even perfectionism in the traditional sense. It's self-protection operating under intellectual camouflage. The mind of a deep thinker doesn't simply process information. It filters it through layers of internalized criticism and imagined outcomes. Before an idea becomes action, it has to pass through a gauntlet of psychological defenses. What if this isn't good enough? What if they think I'm an imposter? What if I succeed and still feel empty? And here lies the root. When you've been conditioned to believe that your worth depends on how flawlessly you perform, taking action becomes dangerous, especially if that action could expose your imperfections. So instead, you think, you analyze, you plan, you construct mental simulations of future failure until inaction starts to feel like the safest choice. But the mechanism runs deeper than just fear. At its core, overthinking is often a trauma response. The child who learned that mistakes were punished or ridiculed becomes the adult who tries to outthink uncertainty. The adult who rewrites emails 10 times, who plans endlessly, who waits for the perfect moment that never arrives. What's tragic is that this mental rigor is often misread as discipline or thoughtfulness, when in fact, it's a defensive loop. A loop powered by an invisible force, the inner critic. The inner critic is not your conscience. It's not the voice of reason. It's the psychological residue of early emotional experiences, internalized voices that once policed your behavior to keep you safe from rejection or humiliation. And now what? They've become indistinguishable from your own thoughts. It's the voice that says, "Don't try that. What if you're not as good as you think?" Or worse, "Who do you think you are to do this?" This voice operates with surgical precision. It knows your deepest insecurities. And when it's wrapped in intellect, it becomes harder to detect because it speaks in logic, not panic. It sounds like, maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe you need to research more before you begin. Maybe it's smarter to wait until you're fully ready. But readiness is an illusion created by fear. And fear, when fused with intelligence, becomes rational hesitation, which is just a more socially acceptable form of paralysis. So what happens over time? Deep thinkers build mental structures so complex they end up trapped inside them. Success doesn't come closer, it gets theorized, dissected, and eventually postponed into non-existence. And because they understand so much, they can even justify their failure with impressive, well-articulated reasons. But here is the harsh truth. Intellect is not enough. Insight doesn't create outcomes. Thought doesn't replace movement. And brilliance without the courage to act becomes a cage of one's own making. What's worse? Most deep thinkers don't realize that they've made a decision. In their minds, they're still figuring things out, but in reality, they've already chosen not to act. Overthinking is not a pause, it's a direction, and that direction leads away from growth. The deeper danger is this. When overthinking becomes your baseline, your identity subtly shifts from a person who hasn't acted yet to a person who doesn't act. And at that point, even your intelligence turns against you. It becomes the very thing that prevents you from experiencing what you've spent years preparing for. So, here's the question I'll leave you with today. Are you using your intelligence to build a future or to protect yourself from the present? Because no amount of analysis will bring safety. There will never be a version of life where you are completely shielded from failure, judgment, or discomfort. The question isn't whether you'll be hurt, it's whether you're willing to grow anyway. You can think your way through 1,000 scenarios, but only action changes them. And if that thought terrifies you, it means you're standing at the edge of something real. Let it shape you. We'll continue this conversation because there's more beneath the surface, much more. Next time, we'll examine how early emotional wounds design the architecture of overthinking and why the voice in your head may not be yours at all. Until then, sit with this, not to analyze it, but to feel it. You don't need another reason. You need to move.
We ended the last episode with a question. Are you using your intelligence to build something or to protect yourself from something? If that question echoed uncomfortably inside you, it's because part of you already knows the answer. And today, we're going deeper, past the surface of thought, past the defense mechanisms, into the origins of this intellectual self-sabotage. Because the truth is, no one is born afraid to take action. That fear is designed, crafted slowly over time by experiences that taught us that safety isn't found in movement, but in control. And when a person grows up in an environment where love, attention, or approval is conditional, where their value depends on how well they perform, behave, or think, they begin to form an internal structure that prioritizes mental control over emotional risk. This is the seedbed of the inner critic. You see, many deep thinkers didn't simply become reflective by nature. Their intellectual development is often a survival strategy, a response to environments where emotional expression was either unsafe or ignored. So instead of feeling, they analyzed. Instead of expressing, they observed. Instead of asserting themselves, they adapted. Over time, these individuals learned that the safest place to live is in the mind. Because the mind can be sharpened, it can be refined, it can be controlled. But emotions? Emotions expose. Emotions risk rejection, so they become muted. What's left is a person who builds identity around being smart rather than being fully human. Now here's where the architecture becomes dangerous. As this pattern solidifies, the inner critic evolves from an external source into an internal authority, and it starts sounding like your own voice. But it's not yours. It's the echo of those who demanded perfection before they offered love, those who rewarded silence over self-expression, those who taught you that being good meant being impressive, not being real. So the inner critic isn't just critical, it's conditional. It speaks in absolutes. If it's not exceptional, it's worthless. If you fail, you'll be exposed. If you stop thinking, you'll lose control. But these aren't rational thoughts. They're emotional imprints, wounds dressed in logic. This is where the sabotage begins. Because if your thinking evolved as a way to avoid emotional vulnerability, then success, which inherently involves risk, exposure, and imperfection, feels dangerous, not desirable. So you begin to build justifications for staying small. You reframe your inaction as wisdom. You avoid decisions under the guise of intellectual integrity. You tell yourself you're just waiting for the right time or gathering more insight. But what's really happening is this. The child within you is still waiting for permission to be enough. And until that child feels safe, the adult can't move forward. Now let's look deeper. This pattern, this over-identification with thinking, is a distortion of the self. It's a defense, and like all defenses, it once served a purpose. But when it becomes chronic, it turns inward and begins to attack the very person it was built to protect. This is the paradox of the deep thinker. The same mind that sees through the world's illusions cannot see through its own protective walls, because those walls aren't made of ignorance. They're made of insight, reinforced by years of internalized scrutiny. And the more brilliant the mind, the stronger the architecture of avoidance. Some call this high-functioning fear. It looks like excellence, but it's fueled by unresolved shame. Shame that says, if I try and fail, I'll confirm what I've always feared. I'm not enough. So instead, you try to think your way out of shame. But shame isn't solved intellectually. It's healed relationally, emotionally, through experience, not analysis. Until then, your thoughts will continue orbiting around a gravitational center of unworthiness, no matter how advanced, refined, or articulate those thoughts become. And this has direct consequences. It's not just a psychological curiosity, it's a barrier to financial freedom, career growth, and meaningful self-expression. Because every opportunity requires action, and action demands trust. Not blind optimism, not arrogance, but a quiet trust in your ability to navigate failure without it collapsing your identity. But if your identity is built on never failing, you'll never start. And that's the trap. You weren't trained to tolerate risk. You were trained to avoid disappointment. So your nervous system registers opportunity as threat, and your mind obeys. Not because you're weak, but because long ago you learned that to stay loved, you had to stay small, smart, and safe. The question is, how long will you keep obeying a voice that no longer belongs to you? Because the inner critic doesn't know who you've become. It only knows who you had to be. So if you want to move forward, not just think differently, but live differently, then you must confront this core truth. Your overthinking is not a personality trait, it's a scar. And once you see that, you can begin to understand the difference between thinking that protects you and thinking that frees you. In the next episode, we'll uncover why perfectionism, especially mental perfectionism, makes action feel unsafe, and how deep thinkers mistake preparation for identity. But for now, reflect on this. What if the voice in your head that's holding you back isn't actually yours?
You've heard this voice before. I'll start when it's ready. I just need a bit more time to fine-tune. I want it to be perfect. These aren't just thoughts. They're patterns. Rituals of delay disguised as diligence. And if you're someone who thinks deeply, it's likely you've confused these rituals for virtue. But make no mistake, this isn't discipline, it's fear. And in many cases, it's fear pretending to be logic. Today, we're confronting a specific psychological trap: mental perfectionism. The obsessive need to refine a thought, an idea, or a plan until it becomes untouchable, until it can't fail, can't be judged, and can't disappoint. Which, of course, means it can't be real. This form of perfectionism is subtle. It doesn't scream. It rationalizes. It convinces you that you're not procrastinating, you're just being thorough. That you're not avoiding action, you're just preparing responsibly. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You're not preparing. You're stalling. Not because you're lazy, but because action, to you, feels inherently unsafe. Let's break that down. Most people assume perfectionism is about high standards. It's not. It's about control. And underneath that control is anxiety, often rooted in early experiences where mistakes were punished or vulnerability was unsafe. In those environments, the child learns, I'm only safe if I don't mess up. Now, take that child and give them a sharp mind. A mind capable of anticipating outcomes, identifying patterns, detecting flaws. What you get isn't confidence. You get self-surveillance, a mind constantly trying to outmaneuver failure by thinking ahead, thinking deeper, thinking more. That's the birth of mental perfectionism. The belief that if you can just think it through well enough, you can avoid pain. But that belief is a lie. No amount of thought can eliminate uncertainty. And yet the deep thinker keeps chasing that impossible standard, creating a loop. Think, refine, hesitate. Think, refine, hesitate. Again and again. At some point, the process becomes the prison. Now, here's where the psychology turns even darker. For many deep thinkers, identity becomes fused with the act of thinking. They don't just use their intellect, they become it. And once your identity is wrapped around how well you think, taking imperfect action threatens not just your ego, but your sense of self. If you act and it goes wrong,
The wound is not just professional, it's existential. You don't fail at something, you become a failure. So to avoid that outcome, you do what seems smart. You delay, you tweak, you wait for the mythical state of readiness. But readiness is a fantasy constructed by fear. The deeper reality is this. The overthinker's fear isn't just failure. It's exposure. Because action makes your thoughts real. Action makes you visible. Action makes you accountable. And for someone whose emotional safety has always depended on staying in control, that kind of exposure is unbearable. So what do? You build brilliant frameworks. You develop perfect plans. You research every variable. You become addicted to potential, because potential can't be criticized. It's pristine, untested, unstained by reality. But potential is also sterile. It doesn't grow. It doesn't move. It just waits. And the longer you wait, the more your identity becomes trapped in a paradox. You're smart enough to succeed, but too scared to try. And so you live in limbo, a place where nothing is wrong, but nothing is real. You know what to do, but can't seem to do it. You have insight, but no momentum. You feel like a fraud, not because you lack ability, but because your life doesn't reflect the depth of your inner world. This is where perfectionism becomes self-abandonment. By trying to protect your imagined self from failure, you deny your actual self the chance to evolve. You mistake flawlessness for value. And in doing so, you unconsciously agree to keep yourself small as long as you can stay protected. But here's the brutal irony. Perfectionism doesn't prevent failure. It guarantees it. Because in the real world, progress isn't made by the most prepared. It's made by the most willing, the ones who act before they're ready, the ones who risk imperfection in service of truth. And you've built a mind strong enough to imagine the future, but not yet free enough to step into it. So what does freedom look like? It's not found in more research, not in another draft, not in another delay disguised as detail. It's found in the willingness to fail publicly, to be seen unfinished, to start anyway. This is not about recklessness. It's about resilience, the kind of inner authority that no longer needs the approval of an imaginary audience before it moves forward. Because the truth is, you don't need permission. You need self-trust. Not the kind built on guarantees, but the kind built on presence. The kind that says, I can handle what happens, even if it hurts, even if I'm wrong, even if I have to rebuild. That's real strength. That's maturity. And that's the only antidote to mental perfectionism. In our final episode, we'll explore how to reconnect with your own inner authority, how to rebuild the trust you once gave away, and how to move from mental safety into embodied clarity. But for now, ask yourself this. What would I attempt if I didn't need to be perfect? And what part of me still believes that being imperfect means being unworthy?
You've spent years trying to get it right. Perfect timing, perfect logic, perfect outcomes. But somewhere deep down, you've always known that what you were really chasing wasn't perfection. It was permission. Not from the world, from yourself. In this final part, we're not going to analyze more. We're going to unravel. We're going to unlearn. We're going to step outside the prison of mental perfection and ask the most important question a deep thinker can ever ask. What voice have I been obeying? Because if you listen closely, beneath the layers of thought, beneath the internal arguments, beneath the rehearsed rationalizations, you'll find that the loudest voice inside you doesn't actually belong to you. It belongs to the standards that raised you, the fears that shaped you, the people who only showed love when you performed, the world that rewarded you for being clever but punished you for being vulnerable. And now, that voice runs your life like a shadow authority. It sounds like you, but it doesn't trust you. It doesn't trust your instincts. It doesn't trust your timing. It doesn't trust your capacity to grow through pain. So it talks. It talks endlessly. It fills your head with analysis, scenarios, and self-doubt, not to guide you, but to stop you, to keep you safe. And safety in this context means one thing: don't change. But here's the shift. Success, real, sustainable, meaningful success, doesn't come from obeying that voice. It comes from replacing it. Not with ego, not with fantasy, but with inner authority. Inner authority is not the voice that says, "I know everything." It's the one that says, "Even if I don't, I'll move forward anyway." It's not built on the absence of fear. It's built on the presence of self-trust. The kind of trust that says, "I don't need to be perfect to begin. I don't need to be fully healed to create. I don't need to be validated to matter." And this shift is psychological, but it's also spiritual because it requires letting go of control. Not recklessly, but intentionally. Letting go of the illusion that thinking alone can save you. Letting go of the belief that your value depends on your performance. Letting go of the identity that says, "I am only as good as my ideas." Once you do this, once you step away from the mental perfection trap, you don't become reckless. You become real. You become rooted. You begin to move not from fear of getting it wrong, but from alignment with something deeper than certainty. And that's when things start to change. You stop asking the world for instructions. You stop over-preparing to avoid judgment. You stop abandoning your intuition every time the inner critic clears its throat. And you begin. You begin to write that thing you've been postponing. You begin to speak what's been stuck in your throat for years. You begin to make the move you've already rehearsed 1,000 times in your head. You begin to live, not hypothetically, not later, now. Not because the fear is gone, but because the fear is no longer in charge. There's no need to demonize your mind. Your intelligence is a gift, but it was never meant to be your master. It was meant to serve your wholeness, to sharpen your choices, not to suffocate them, to illuminate your path, not to replace your courage. You don't need another breakthrough. You need a return to the version of you that existed before self-doubt became your default setting, before fear disguised itself as realism, before shame taught you to dress up hesitation as humility. Because that version of you, they're not missing. They're waiting. Waiting for you to stop negotiating with ghosts. Waiting for you to stop shrinking your truth to fit someone else's comfort. Waiting for you to stop being clever and start being honest. And yes, honesty requires risk. It means making decisions without guarantees. It means letting people see you incomplete. It means owning your voice without outsourcing your worth. But the moment you do that, truly, decisively, you'll notice something unexpected. You no longer need to prove anything. Because when you're rooted in your own inner authority, success stops being a finish line. It becomes a byproduct of alignment, of integrity, of showing up when it counts. And that's the final truth I'll leave you with. Intelligence is a tool. Courage is a threshold. But authority is a choice. Not the authority handed to you, not the one that you've been taught to wait for, but the one you reclaim when you decide that your life no longer needs permission to begin. Thank you for being here, for listening, for questioning, for reflecting, not to fix yourself, but to remember who you were before you forgot. The part of you that doesn't need to overthink, just to act, just to move, just to be. Until next time, trust that voice, not the loud one, the true one, the one that's been whispering all along.